Hey, hi, hello. Welcome to Diana Emerson. Today we're listening to The Secrets of the Morgue, and this is The Cowboy and the Killer.
With the leg and the foot just sticking out of the ground, it made for an eerie scene. Cause of death is very much a mystery.
He met a lot of unseemly people. He had worked with mob figures in Las Vegas.
Perhaps he'd been held against his will.
Did one of those enemies come back and put him in that grave?
If I had tried to write the wildest script for murder, I don't think I could have ever come up with anything like this.
Every murder is a mystery. But a victim's body is a sea of evidence. Every fiber is a clue. Every wound, a piece of the puzzle. The medical examiner holds the key to unlock their stories and catch a killer. This is Secrets of the Morgue.
San Joaquin County is a very good, stable place to live.
Parts of the county are rural. There is a community of people that are involved with horses.
There are also good families in this community, but every county has got its crime. There's no county that's crime free.
On a cool February day, signs of trouble are spotted in the sky.
A farm worker saw vultures circling part of the vineyard. He was curious, of course, so he went over there. That's when he saw it.
I get a call to report to a vineyard. As soon as I got out of the car, I could see what appeared to be a piece of a human body sticking out of the ground.
When I initially arrived on scene, I see the partial leg from the knee down, which is exposed above ground. The rest, you can see a shallow grave, but can't see anything else.
In the Western movies, somebody dies and they bury them, and then there's almost like a mounding effect. You could see some of that in an area that would be consistent with the size of about a human body.
To get to the truth behind this gruesome discovery, investigators turn to forensic pathologist Dr. Terry Haddix.
Performing autopsies is a very fulfilling thing to do, not only for myself to be able to understand exactly what transpired, but also to be able to answer questions for families, for law enforcement, or whoever might have a question about what happened to this individual who died. I had heard while I was performing autopsies that the remains of an individual had been found in a vineyard. This was unusual. It's not all that common that a forensic pathologist encounters cases of bodies that have been buried in shallow graves. Honestly, it wasn't something that I'd actually encountered before in my career. At the scene, I see a leg sticking up. But there's no soft tissue, there's no skin, there's no muscle that's left on that part. The most likely way for that tissue to be lost is by animals coming in and stripping that off. Is it only the leg, only the foot, or are we dealing with an entire body? It made for an eerie scene. I tried to be professional. But you can't just completely separate yourself from what's being revealed right in front of you. Have not only an individual who has died, but that person is part of a family, circle of friends, as co-workers. And frequently when a forensic pathologist is called out, it's because they've died in a violent fashion.
With much of the mystery hidden beneath the surface, investigators bring in another expert, Dr. Roger Lajeunesse, to assist in the excavation.
Solving problems, getting something that doesn't meet a textbook example, something that requires me to think, gives me the greatest satisfaction. The first task was to get an idea of the orientation of the body, lay out a grid so that when they find something, they can say, we found something from area A as opposed to area B.
We remove the dirt around the body a little bit at a time in layers. We are looking for evidence of anything that might be potentially informative, something that looks out of place in that area. That would include things that are very small, such as hairs, fibers.
There are risks involved in trying to remove that body. And one of the most important things that has to be considered is not introducing something to the crime scene that wasn't there before. For example, cigarette butts or a mark on the body. And so extreme care has to be taken.
As we remove dirt off progressively, we can see that it's not just a foot, it's not just a leg, but we have the entirety of a body.
We could see that the body was face up, kind of in a cradle position.
He was a 50-year-old white male.
After I looked at the body externally and found no obvious cause of death, the big question is, who was this person?
The forensic team begins to remove the decomposing body.
The soil underneath the body that's been in the ground is kind of an oily mass.
After death, fluids can drain out from the body. Decomposition affects all structures within the body, including the blood vessels. So the blood vessels will break down after death, and bloody fluid can in fact drain. We call this purge fluid. And this fluid is bloody looking, but doesn't necessarily mean that there was an injury that was present there. It's not uncommon to find it to puddle or to drip in different areas, depending upon if a body has stayed in one place for a period of time.
And if there's not a lot of air between the object that's sitting in it, you're going to get a suction. You got to break that adhesion or suction so that you can remove them. I used a backboard from an EMT vehicle, and I put it between the individual and the pit he was in, and then used the edge of the pit as a fulcrum. And I finally was able to loosen him, and then we could then move him over onto the tarp and then haul them out.
Investigators can now begin their analysis.
Other than the animal depredation on the lower foot, the rest of the body was completely intact.
However, the body demonstrated some evidence of decompositional changes, including some discoloration of the skin, some slippage of the skin, but relatively little distortion Remarkably to me, there appeared to be tattoos on both arms.
We start thinking, is it somebody that we're looking for as a missing person?
Ramos checks recent missing persons reports and gets a potential hit.
I'm matching up the description on the missing person poster to my person that's in the grave, and everything is matching up. Tattoo, the facial features.
It was evident that we had found Larry McNabney.
Detectives have been looking for Larry McNabney, a prominent lawyer who went missing 21 weeks ago. The body in the vineyard seems to match his description, but they need an official ID.
When buried body is discovered, it's not automatic that fingerprints would be available. You don't know how long they've been buried and how much decay has taken place. Depending on weather conditions and the burial conditions, you may lose a fingerprint within 24 hours.
This time, investigators are lucky.
There was a great deal of skin that still remained on the body, and in particular on the hands, which permitted fingerprint identification. Those fingerprints matched Larry McNabney. And at that point in time, we had an identification.
The intact condition of the body creates a question about the timeline of the crime.
In a grave as shallow as we had in this circumstance, I would have expected a great deal more of the compositional change, but also more importantly, changes due to the animals gaining access to the body and feeding off of the soft tissue.
We're not sure at that point why we have this gap. From the time that Larry McNabney was missing in September to the time that we discovered the body 5 months later. So we don't know what's going on. He had to have been somewhere.
Investigators are trying to uncover how Larry McNabney ended up buried in a shallow vineyard grave. They look into his life for answers.
Larry McNabney is an attorney that has his law offices in Sacramento that he ran with his wife, Alyssa.
As a defense attorney, Larry McNabney, by definition, met a lot of unseemly people. That's what defense attorneys do. He had worked with mob figures in Las Vegas.
He was one of those people that commanded attention. He was a flamboyant, very dynamic individual.
He had this cowboy image that he carefully cultivated.
If you've been in an accident and don't know what to do, you need somebody who does. I do. I'm Larry McNabney. Call me.
Prior to him going missing, he was real involved in the horse showing circuit. He's slated to be the rookie of the year.
Detectives learn that the missing person report for McNabney was filed by an unlikely source.
The first person who actually reported Larry missing was a new hire at the law firm by the name of Ginger. Even though she's taking cases, filing cases, and generating documents with Larry's name on them, she's never seen nor heard from Larry McNabney.
So in late November, she reports her boss as a missing person. In the missing person report, we found out that the last time that anybody had seen Larry alive was on or about September 10th.
Larry's body was discovered in February, 5 months after he went missing. Dr. Haddock suggests a theory that may explain the conflicting timeline.
He does not look as decomposed as what one would expect had he actually died 5 months earlier. So is it possible that he didn't die 5 months ago and died somewhat more recently?
Detectives piece together Larry's last known movements.
The last time that Larry was seen, it was at a horse show down in Southern California.
And he's there to show what is his prized horse, the best one yet.
Larry did very poorly. He wasn't as sharp as he normally would be. He wasn't dressed to the T. And that's really the last time that anybody saw him.
They try to uncover where McNabney may have gone after the horse show.
Family members who had been looking for him and trying to reach him had been told that he was pulled away to handle a case someplace else. Another story was that he had traveled to another country and that he was off on a golf vacation.
Well, it can be really difficult if someone isn't reported missing immediately. As time goes on, evidence can disappear very quickly. Someone may not be noticed missing in the first day or two, but that could mean that investigators are losing key evidence.
Detective Ramos seeks out the person closest to McNabney. His wife, Alyssa.
We're desperate to find out where Alyssa's at. We weren't able to make any contact. Is she okay at this point? We have no idea. Maybe she ran into foul play. We don't know.
With Alyssa missing and Larry found dead, investigators consider if there could be a connection to organized crime.
One of the possibilities I was considering is that perhaps he'd been held against his will for a period of time and killed much closer in time to when the body was found.
The work that Larry did might definitely make him some enemies. If one of those enemies come back and put him in that grave.
Detectives hope that Dr. Haddix can reveal more about when and how Larry McNabney died.
In doing the external examination, I'm looking for presence of any injuries or anything that may speak to how he might have died. I'm looking to see, is there something that suggests that he may have been restrained or confined in some fashion? What we can find is that there can be abrasions or scrapes around wrists, around ankles, and these may look like ropes or zip ties or something along the lines like that. If we find evidence of that, we can actually also cut through the skin in the area to see if there's evidence of bleeding beneath those areas, to suggest that he had been struggling against restraints. But I found no evidence to suggest that he had been tied or restrained in any fashion.
McNabney's cause of death also remains a mystery.
Something happened to that body to maintain its degree of preservation in that period of time before he was buried in the vineyard. I look at every aspect of the body externally. I see no evidence of obvious injuries. X-rays are taken. I didn't see any indications of recent fractures or bullets. I also looked for other things such as injection sites. I found no indications of them. I look at all of the different organs and also the brain and within the neck. After doing all of those examinations, however, there's no obvious evidence of why he died. The cause of death is very much a mystery.
Detectives track down the friends who were with Larry and Alyssa in the days before he vanished.
The The Whalens are a horse racing, horse showing family.
Whalen's son-in-law, who was friends with Larry McNabney. They used to play golf together.
When investigators interview Whalen, he tells them about the last time they saw Larry's wife, Alyssa.
Larry had a very distinctive leather wallet that he was extremely proud of. But it was oversized, so he used to always take it out. Alyssa showed up at the ranch with a lot of Larry's personal property in the red BMW that they had purchased. Whalen very specifically told me that he remembers seeing that wallet on the back seat of the BMW. And he said that he found it extremely strange because Larry would never give that wallet away.
With questions swirling, detectives dig into Larry and Alyssa's relationship.
Larry McNabney had set up shop SSA in Las Vegas. Business was thriving. He had over $100,000 a month payout in the law firm. So he was doing quite well.
Alyssa applied for a position in his office and wound up becoming an office manager.
From the minute he saw her, he is smitten.
While Alyssa was Larry's employee, her work ethic was questionable.
While doing that job, she embezzled quite a bit of money.
Everybody in the office is aware that this is going on. They're thinking that she's going to be fired, she's going to be arrested.
But Larry seems unfazed by Alyssa's theft.
There was this huge ethical breach. And the Nevada State Bar, they did not disbar Larry, but they told him you can no longer have Alyssa working for you. She can't be any part of your law practice. That is what sent Larry packing to California. He left this lucrative law practice in Nevada to start from scratch in Sacramento just because he wanted to stay with Alyssa and have Alyssa continue working for him.
Larry and Alyssa set up the law firm. A young lady by the name of Sarah Dutra starts to work in the office, just assisting with filing, and she very quickly starts to get a more active role to the point that her and Alyssa are inseparable. They're conducting office business together. They're going everywhere together. She travels with Larry and Alyssa to the horse shows.
The tight bond between Alyssa and Sarah became a source of conflict in the relationship with Larry. Larry felt that Sarah was an interloper now coming between himself and his wife. And it got to the point, because there was so much conflict between Larry and Alyssa over Sarah, that Alyssa would bring Sarah to these horse shows and sequester her in a different hotel so that Larry wouldn't know. Then Alyssa and Sarah would spend quiet time together.
And it starts to get to Larry that they're inseparable. It's starting to bug him to the point that he starts to tell people that he's going to get rid of Sarah.
Well-known attorney Larry McNabney is dead, and his wife Alyssa is missing. Detectives turn their attention to Sarah Dutra, hoping she's the thread that will unravel this mystery.
Sarah is a young office assistant who is suddenly the darling of the boss's wife. Alyssa is buying Sarah designer handbags and shoes, even leases her a car. She's showered with all these luxuries and extravagances. Life is good suddenly for Sarah Dutra.
Detectives return to the McNabney's friends, the Whalens, to see what they know about Sarah.
Sarah comes around to the Whalen Ranch quite a bit. And the Waylands recognize Sarah as kind of a helper, kind of like Alyssa's right hand.
So we had the older version and the young entrepreneur who was learning from her, is what it was.
It's clear to the Waylands that when they are together, Alyssa's the one calling the shots. They also recall her asking some disturbing questions.
Debbie Wayland recalled it while they were grooming their horses in the stable. Alyssa asked her if the horse tranquilizer could kill a human being. Debbie was kind of shocked that Alyssa would ask her this, and her response was, heck yeah, it'll put down a 1,500-pound horse. Of course it'll kill a human being. When we find out that Alyssa had this conversation with Debbie, we specifically direct the pathologist to look in to see if there was any kind of horse tranquilizer in Larry's system.
Samples of the blood, liver, and head hair were sent for analysis, and then I waited to get the results.
When we don't see any obvious signs of trauma, one of the first things that you think about is, is this person poisoned? Poison leaves very little physical trace on the outside of the body. But then the toxicology is going to tell you the story.
I was contacted by the toxicology lab. They had identified xylazine. Xylazine is a veterinarian tranquilizing agent. It is not a drug that's used in humans. Ultimately, it results in circulatory collapse. The amount that was found was 8 milligrams per liter in the blood. This was greater than 25 times the reported lethal levels of this in humans. So I had a cause of death, homicidal poisoning with xylazine.
The discovery shifts Alyssa from another potential victim to a prime suspect. But she is still nowhere to be found.
We have pictures of her. We know who we're looking for, but we really don't know who she is.
Detectives also can't find a paper trail. This leads them to the realization Alyssa McNabney doesn't exist. That's why they haven't been able to find her.
We realized that Alyssa has used at least 38 other aliases in the past.
She was smart. Let's just put it that way. She managed to live her life without ever using her real name, without ever producing anything that would positively identify her.
Investigators team up with the FBI to expand the manhunt. Together, they uncover a pattern of deceit leading back to the source of Alyssa's alias.
Alyssa is very cunning, but she made one big mistake. Alyssa is a name that she borrowed from a former cellmate in Florida. The investigators showed this former cellmate a picture of the woman who had married Larry McNabney. And the cellmate said, that's Lauren Sims.
When we found out that her true name is Lauren Renee Sims, we were able to trace that back to Florida, and the family was well established in the area. It appeared that she had a normal childhood, a loving childhood. She dropped out of school and started getting into trouble.
She had a rap sheet with 110 pages on it. She'd been grifting her whole life, and very cleverly doing so.
She was a crook and had always been a crook. Credit card fraud, theft, always non-violent crimes, but property crimes.
I think she was narcissistic. She just didn't care what harm she caused anybody else as long as she got what she wanted out of this.
Authorities suspect that McNabney's wife, who has been living under the alias Alyssa, could also be his killer. But there are still unanswered questions about the state of Larry's remains.
We were still missing an explanation for why Mr. McNamnee's body was in as good a condition as it was, despite not having been seen for 5 months. I discussed this with the investigators and very specifically brought up the possibility that his body may have been kept in an area where it was cool, which would slow down decomposition, but also in an area where the body was not accessible to insects, because we also didn't have any evidence of insect activity.
Flies are attracted to the aroma, the scent of decaying flesh. I've attended crime scenes where flies are depositing eggs on a body almost immediately upon death, and those fly eggs then develop into maggots.
To unravel this mystery, Dr. Haddix weighs the options.
I did not think the body had been frozen. The reason is that process of freezing and then thawing results in a much more brisk rate of decomposition. In this case, we didn't have extensive decomposition.
She can only come to one conclusion.
If the body had been refrigerated, that could potentially account for the findings that we had in this case.
When we spoke with Greg Whalen, we found out that he and his workers had moved some items out of the McNamney house, and one of the items that they had moved to the Whalen Ranch was a refrigerator.
The refrigerator was actually being used to store food and beverages.
And we've got a warrant so we could secure the refrigerator as part of this investigation.
Dr. Haddix analyzes the refrigerator from the ranch.
There was evidence of microcracks within the bottom of that refrigerator. Presence of microcracks was indicative that there had been something heavy placed within the bottom of that refrigerator. A heavy weight, such as the body of an adult man.
The refrigerator had not really been cleaned up very well. There were still reddish brown stains. But at that point in time, it could have been human excrement. It could have been food. When the testing came back from the lab, the reddish brown stain that was in the refrigerator was determined to be decomposition fluid.
Investigators test the decomposition fluid for DNA.
The DNA evidence in the refrigerator showed that Larry McNamney had been kept in that refrigerator for a period of time before he was put in the ground and then discovered.
Forensic evidence places Larry in Alyssa's refrigerator, which explains the condition of the buried remains. Now they have to find her.
She is paying her way to get back to Florida by selling Larry's jewelry, some watches that he had. And she ends up in the Destin area.
She applies for work in a law office as a paralegal. But at the law office, she provides a false social security number. In fact, the number that belongs to a man. The lawyers there call the authorities. All of their attention is now focused on the Florida Panhandle. They swarm the community.
It was a patrol officer that found Alyssa sitting in a chair sunning herself by a swimming pool. It was coming to an end one way or the other.
Detectives find Larry McNabney's wife living under an alias in Florida. A local officer confronts the fugitive.
And before he even opens his mouth, she says, "I'm the one you're looking for." Lauren was tired of running, tired of living on the lam. I think she was exhausted and just ready to give up.
While in custody, Alyssa implicates an accomplice in the murder of her husband, Larry.
Alyssa basically confessed to the homicide of Larry McNabney at the time that she was arrested. She put her spin on it that it's Sarah's idea, not only to kill him, but also how to accomplish it.
Sarah was also taken into custody here in California. She was charged with homicide.
Sarah tried to portray herself as being a victim who was doing everything out of fear of Alyssa, which is the farthest from the truth. Any of the statements that we obtained from anybody that observed them together said that they were extremely close, described as two peas in a pod.
Between Alyssa and Sarah's statements, investigators finally piece together the events of Larry's murder.
That night after the horse competition, Larry isn't feeling well. He doesn't come down to dinner with his friends. Alyssa brings a couple of glasses of wine up to his room. That is the night that she and Sarah decided to kill Larry.
Alyssa put some horse tranquilizer in the red wine and then gave the wine to Larry and he drank it. When he drank those 2 glasses of red wine, there was enough horse tranquilizer in there that it incapacitated him.
Xylazine in humans causes sedation. Ultimately, it results in respiratory depression, meaning not able to breathe normally.
They put Larry in the wheelchair, took him down to the truck. They load him in the truck. And they go through the Yosemite area. They get out. They attempt to dig. But then they realize that Larry's still alive.
They are clearly cold-blooded killers. They want him dead. They are causing his death. But he's not yet quite dead. And they don't have whatever it takes to actually finish him at that point.
They get back in the truck. They bring him into the house, into the living room area, and then roll him off of the wheelchair, and then just cover him with a sheet. And then Alyssa and Sarah go upstairs and go to sleep. They wake up the next morning, and they realize that Larry is now deceased. They start to panic a little bit, but then they get the sheet. They wrap him up. They put him in the refrigerator.
The refrigerator made it challenging to try to come up with an estimate for how long this individual was dead. There was a lesser degree of decomposition than what I would have expected.
And then inside the refrigerator is where he stays until what we believe is 5 months later when they take him out and bury him in the vineyard.
This case posed a number of challenges. The cause of death, which was something unique, the circumstances surrounding the death, and the circumstances surrounding the storage of the body before it being buried out in the vineyard. I've never had another case like that, and all of those very much stand out in my mind.
Investigators also put together the motive for the murder.
Larry was stepping in between Alyssa and Sarah, and I think they were fully involved with each other. The fact that they killed him allowed them to continue to operate the law firm and continue to generate money for their lifestyle after he was out of the picture.
Sarah and Alyssa are both charged with murder for financial gain, which could carry the death penalty. But before the case can go to trial, Alyssa takes matters into her own hands.
She tied bed sheets together and attached this makeshift rope to a ventilation grill and hanged herself.
This was her last great act of defiance. She lived life on her terms. She created things to play out the way she wanted them to, and she ended it the way she wanted to.
When I think about this case, it's very hard because I remember thinking this is somebody that's my age and is not doing the things that she should be doing.
On January 16th, 2003, Sarah Dutra goes to trial. She maintains her story that Alyssa planned Larry's murder.
Forensics of Sarah's laptop showed that she had actually researched ketamine. The medication that was actually used is akin to ketamine, same effects. She was involved with this from the beginning. She was involved in the planning of it. She was involved in the execution of it. She was involved in the cover-up. She was just as cold, just as calculating as Alyssa.
She ended up getting convicted of manslaughter and ended up getting a 11-year sentence for her participation in the homicide. The sentence that she got was very light in light of all the planning and the egregiousness of the whole homicide, the way they went about it.
The medical science actually is the hinge point that solved the case. Without the medical science to prove that he was actually in that refrigerator, a lot of questions would have been left unanswered.
I found it gratifying ultimately to be able to arrive at a cause of death in this case, which provided information to the investigators and to the family. They deserve to know what happened. They deserve to have their questions answered.